survival for a CFO. People all focus too much on mergers, but after a merger, what happens? Most difficult thing. How you are going to file your returns globally? What sort of a carry forward loss provisions you have? Yes, you will definitely have to give effect to your merger entries. You will be possibly valuing your assets. But after valuing the assets, do you know what sort of a depreciation accounting you will have to do? Do you know what sort of a deferred tax assets which will arise because of that? And arising from that, what will be the permanent differences? And because of which, when you report as a consolidated company, is your effective tax rate going up? Unless you are able to quickly pick up this and then communicate, as this merger, my effective tax rate is going to go up. I'm doing this revaluation of assets so as to save my net worth. And this would be, and then ensuring that the auditors are able to certify the financials. So these are the various nitty-gritties, and that is where first you have to think, how I want my organization information to flow. It is also very, very, very important thing that when you tell people that this is going to be an ERP, what is that ERP? You are making people break the transactions into different modules. You are making them into further smaller elements, and those elements you would decide how it should be linked. And this would result into typically what we call as a business intelligence report. You can have a specific budgeted parameters which will keep telling you that these are the parameters where you are behaving correctly, you are not behaving correctly. A company which has about say 20 locations, how do you as an CFO certify that my statutory regulatory compliance is okay, just on basis of a face of 10 people? So do you have a mechanism by which whenever there is a 195 return which has to be filed, is it filed? Are you ensuring the reverse service tax which was to be paid at a particular location, is it paid? How do you know people have correctly made a provision on 194C for the year-end provisions? Now these are the number of statutory regulatory compliances. Do you know withholding taxes has been paid for all your various foreign contracts? Now once you start thinking, and if you simply going to rely that I will just file as a CFO certification to the board, you are personally accountable. And unless you are able to prove that there are appropriate processes in place by which you are signing this, there could be a serious professional liability which can come on an CFO. And that is where standardization, optimization of the processes, various information reports, these are required. There are a number of benefits, etc., which you all are familiar when you implement an ERP, but I think the biggest thing is you can put technology. Today, nobody uses, nobody writes letters. People all use WhatsApp. But when it comes to the accounting, I am surprised people are very comfortable to the tallies of the world. People are very comfortable with good old Excels. I'm not saying Excel is bad, but does it stop a new recruit whom you have not correctly interviewed? And are you very sure that the fraud is not happening behind your back? The number of RTGS and NEFTs which you are doing, are you very sure that those are going to the correct accounts? Are you ensuring that the bill which you feel is getting paid is actually not a duplicate bill? And as a CFO, for example, today a 50,000 crore CFO, how do you ensure? It's impossible. Unless you have an assurance on the processes and you have an particular exceptional MIS coming from ERP, the life of a CFO can be an absolute nightmare. And when I talk to many of my colleagues, this is the single biggest reason many of the CFOs fail. They do not give it as much importance as they would give for completing their tax audits, closing their accounts, closing their transfer pricing, as the real thing which makes them run, makes them tick day in, day out, is the ERP system. Now, what are the major challenges? Challenges is not a technology. You might use Accenture to get a SAP implemented. You might use IBMs of the world. There is a complete, what you typically call is business process re-engineering. And the CFO has to drive this upfront. He has to ensure that that the correct processes are put in place, and the processes will allow you to pick up financial and non-financial controls. Another important point are the power centers in the organizations. When you start implementing ERP, it cuts across the power centers. And you would get surprised why ERPs fail. ERPs do not fail because ERPs are bad. ERPs fail because they cut across the power centers in the organizations. And you as a CFO who is capable of interpreting various financial numbers does not require anybody's intervention if you would like to communicate your key reports to the managing director, to the board. You will also be surprised that many of the ERPs are deliberately kept at a very, very basic levels. You will see that people stop somehow only from preparation of accounts. Moment you talk of a BI or a business intelligence, you would see a huge resistance that this is not possible. Our environment is very complex. It keeps changing. Friends, I am sure the Fortune 500, most of the companies use ERP as a part of very, very routine life. You take GE, you take any of the companies, they use ERP because they do not want to spend their intelligence in a very, very routine activities of the world. So just to wrap up, this is the area which you have to ensure that putting it like you ensure that your back is safe. So far as the ERPs is running properly, so far as the controls are there, so far as you are getting an exceptional report, you are sure that the purpose for which you are basically hired is to ensure that the financial statements are delivered in time. You are able to analyze and explain it. You are able to do a statutory regulatory compliances. These are all in place. So when you do this vetting for an ERP, many times the thought process is, okay, let's change it because our organization is unique, I am unique, let's customize it. Never make the mistake. Most of the ERPs have followed the best practices, best Fortune 500 companies practices. If that ERP doesn't suit you, please change your behavior. Please change the behavior of the organization and follow the ERP as much as possible. Unless you are only one of the million type of a business model, it does not make sense to change the reports. Yes, you can have some customization, but avoid the customization as much as possible. Customization creates bugs. Customization ensures people are able to play it around. So it's extremely important that you change your business practices so as to meet the best practices. And that is where instead of spending 75% of your time in closing accounts and preparing some debtors reports and all that, you will start spending, analyzing, benchmarking. And because the reports, information will be available across. There is no need for you to carry your file or folder and daily, weekly or monthly report to the senior people. It's not required. When you take a call on the ERPs, it's very important that what is your responsibility towards accounting standards, and regulatory compliances. This is one more area where we give too much importance to the improvisations. We give too much importance to the cases which are only one-off, and because as an chartered accountants, we are trained to think, oh, here there is a gray area I can use. This is something which can be challenged. It's good. You must continuously look at the areas where you can improvise. But when you are holding a CFO's positions, you must standardize. You must ensure that these are my accounting policies and these cannot be compromised. If every divisional SBU accountant, location accountant start using the improvisation, please imagine what sort of a chaos it can create in the organizations. You will have different revenue recognitions if you have a projects happening and the revenue recognition criteria are different. You can have a serious issue. You will have issues of advance invoicing because the terms of commercials are different for different businesses. You will have a serious issue, for example, in terms of hedge accounting, if you allow people to interpret AS30 differently across. So it's very, very important that you define what is typically called and significant accounting policies. What is, everybody knows what are accounting standards, what is Ind AS, what is IFRS. I don't think, but the interpretation of that, simple thing. Are you okay that your depreciation is going for 20 years when you very clearly know your machinery's life is only 10 years? Or you will keep arguing, no, companies that allows me, and after 10th year, suddenly when the machine is discarded, you start wondering, how do I explain to the management such a large write-off in the plant and machinery? When you take over different companies or different units, do you apply impairment test? It's very, very easy. Now we will explain this way to auditors and it will sail through. And suddenly when you use the net cash generating unit method and start realizing that this unit is not going to make money, and suddenly $1 billion hit you have to take, you are reading in the newspapers and the financial dailies how a large acquisitions have failed, and suddenly people have to explain why they have to take $1 billion hit on a goodwill. So whilst it's good to plan and do for a goodwill accounting, when you're playing as a CFO, if I were to argue on an amende, I will suggest all this. No, you can do this, you can do. But when I play a role of a CFO, I would say no, conservatism. I'm worried about impairment. Your MAT entitlements, are you sure you are able to get a MAT entitlements? Because when you are continuously expanding, you are seeing that your liability will be only MAT next few years. And when the MAT tax credit you are not able to get realized, suddenly 1 year you will be asked to write off the MAT tax credit. And then what will happen? Suddenly you will have to explain to the whole financial and analyst world that why my tax percentage is higher. Same thing happens with DTA. People routinely create deferred tax assets, saying that virtual certainty is not required and like no convincing evidence I will provide, and I will keep creating deferred tax assets. It's better to recognize that deferred tax assets is not recognizable for this particular unit and take a hit when problem is smaller. Unless you take these accounting calls well in advance and convince the management that this is the better way, one day the business can get killed because of not proper accounting policies. And this has happened across again and again, not only India but overseas. I'm not going to this because all of you are familiar with accounting standards. Very important is, as a CFO, are you keeping track of the new drafts? Most of the times we think, especially people from the industry, that it's not their job to look at an exposure drafts, and only people who in practice or some association will give some comments. And we will wait, and when it gets announced, we will say, oh wow, we will attend some session and try to get ourselves updated. Please remember and understand, if you make representations at a correct time through your trade bodies or associations, government listens. It's many times people are not familiar if there is some gem and jewelry business and may not be familiar what will be the implications. Or if there are certain construction related standards, some of you may not be familiar. Unless you understand the impact of those exposure drafts and well in time explain and seek a transitionary time if you have to move. Otherwise, these drafts once gets implemented can create very, very serious issue for the business. Many people, I'm sure, would have kept themselves ready for a switch to IFRS. Many of you might be having units where US GAAP is there. Some of you would have a Canadian GAAP, etc. It's very, very important as a CFO. Instead of getting into just nitty-gritties or very routine way, you must understand which business transactions will have what impact in different gaps. Most of the times people do not understand or pay enough attention and get their financials prepared, and then they realize they find it very difficult a BV company when they acquire, and why there is a particular financial results as compared to your Indian accounting. So these things are extremely important when you have multiple gaps. you must understand how they get impacted by different standards. Schedule 6. Many of us, including me, we used to follow Schedule 6 very routinely till I moved from accounting to a finance role. And I suddenly realized banks today start looking at your balance sheet differently. Earlier, people used to file some filing for the CMA and get this accounting working capital assessment done. Today, since last year, you try your working capital assessment, your bankers will tell you that your drawing power is not getting justified by this. Because the Schedule 6 very clearly defines current, non-current today. Unless you give a lot of importance that why should I call this non-current or current assets, you will face a serious problem in raising bank finances. And that is where your understanding, I'll give a small example. You give a loan to your subsidiaries, 11 months. Some people say, no, 11 months paisa nahi aayega, let's have 3 years loan. Everybody says, yes, it's a very good idea, let's have 5 years loan agreement. You classify non-current, your large subsidiary loans. Your drawing power is gone. Not only that, if 11 months, your gain or loss comes to profit and loss. If it is more than 11 months, it gets. So when there is a gain, you will suddenly realize you have a large gains which you cannot recognize in the profit and loss. Just because you decided to sign a contract for 5 years. Nothing to do with the accounting standard. It's the way you have interpreted and you have understood the requirement of accounting standards to your business requirements. So whilst you interpret correctly, there is always a gray area. There is some flexibility. Take a call of which accounting standards next 5 years, 7, 10 years, what will happen, how my business is going to change, and then take a call. Because then you can say, this is I am going to follow consistently. There are few more regulatory things. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the New Companies Act, and it's quite onerous. The provisions are quite onerous, and as a CFO, you must get simple thing. People are suddenly realizing that all their promoter companies, you cannot have one proxy. You need to have minimum number of shareholders present. So today, if my promoters hold 50%, earlier I used to just have a one proxy. And today, if you do not have enough quorum, you are gone for your AGM. The filing of XBRL, many of the organizations are finding it really difficult. People complete their accounting audit very easily. Suddenly they realize cost audit, they are not ready. And last year there was an extension, this year suddenly no extension. People suddenly find that your cost audit has to be approved by the board. Your board meeting has just done an accounts approval. And in a large organization, you cannot just do by a circular resolution. So your cost audit is not there. So these are the various compliances issues which as a CFO you must have your statutory calendar in place. Your secretarial compliances should be very clearly defined. Otherwise, suddenly you will see you have an issue. For example, a few provisions, 293, 1D, 372A, are you on top of it for your organizations? Not when it has to be filed. Your 400% ODI net worth requirements. The multiple layer which Amrish just explained in terms of subsidiaries. Now it's good to have a knowledge, but it's very, very important to know where are these regulatory things are hitting me and am I on top of it? Do I have a checklist to check it every month that these things I am handling? Transfer pricing. Many people say that indirect control, I will not fire. I said fine. But if you decide correctly that that is my governance structure will be this. All my AS18, whether then my domestic transfer pricing cases, my international pricing cases, I will follow a governance structure. It's not very difficult. The thing is we first do transactions, then we start looking at documentation. But if you identify your chain of promoters, your cross holdings, you understand because entire international transfer pricing is based on commercial rationale. I am sure if you want to differentiate A and B, and if you are in depth in transactions, you will be able to find multiple nuances why this is an correct domestic particular transfer pricing, why this is an arm's length. Arm's length is simple. What is the length of the arm? It can be smaller, it can be. You have to define correctly, and that has to be through the commercial rationale. It should not be by reading the clauses of only transfer pricing. So when you define to give a particular discount or charge particular premium, find it out and create an appropriate benchmark. It's not very difficult. So CFO must get before the transfer pricing transactions is conceptualized. He should not start thinking after 6 months when the documents come and how do I, it will never work. Tax audits, annual income tax returns, I insist that every quarter in my organization, the tax working is done as if it's a end of the year. And I see a lot of resistance because of that. People feel they can take a budgeted rate, budgeted profits, budgeted ATIAs. I just refuse to accept. If you just insist that every quarter your tax provision has to be done as if that's an end of the year, you would find it's an huge relief at the year end. For example, as a CFO, you are asked now, what will be your advance tax installment? Just do not go by, okay, 15%, I'll now do 30% and 45%. You please ask your business people to reassess the profitability requirement. You'll be surprised how powerful you can become just by asking that I would like to do an advance tax working. Let's re-estimate now what are my earnings this quarter, next quarter, what are the various profitability I would be expecting. You would see you would get a huge resistance. No, take business plan, take last year's, take first quarter annualized, all that. If you say, no, I am required to estimate, so I want this, you may get 50%. But slowly, you would be driving the profitability planning of the company. And that's a huge thing. So using this statutory thing, instead of only implementing it, can you use to drive? TDS compliances. As you know, most of 195 cases are purely because of bad drafting. People do not know, people simply either transfer that this is the cost to the company so that commercial department need not negotiate the clauses. There are no the permanent residence proof, who will provide, how they will provide, what tax rate you will pay. There is absolute confusion. And in the end, you somehow go and manage Scindia House. It just doesn't work. You will have to make a plan, and it is very simple, it's not very difficult. If you use TDS compliances, that before a contract gets frozen, finance department has to vet it from a tax compliances. It works beautifully. Transfer pricing, especially international, it's extremely important. You must know, you are aware of what's happening everywhere on the guarantees given. There are huge problems because without guarantee, none of the bleeding subsidiaries overseas will be able to raise money. You give a guarantee, do you charge guarantee commission? If you charge, there is a cost. You are not able to use the carry forward losses overseas because of participating exemption, thin capitalization rules, so many things. So the question is, you just do not charge. If you do not charge, will it get added here? Definitely yes. At least have you provided in your tax returns? You might not have charged in the books. So it's very important, otherwise suddenly 4 years you will get some 200 crores demand coming on transfer pricing with interest and penalty. And these are the times when CFO is held accountable. That you did not flag off these issues to the management well in advance. So it's your failure. Whereas you would be thinking, I am doing a very good tax planning for the organization, sorry. The organization do not think that way. Domestic transfer pricing, it's a nightmare. But moment you move to the governance structures, it becomes simple. You should say, you are dealing with a promoter company, fine. Contracts, let's have, because there is a limit up to which you can fight promoters and your MDs. But you can create and write structures. You can ensure that the benchmarking and because what is transfer pricing? It's all of documentation, it's all of benchmarking. Your company's case will be different than his company's case. So you will have to create differentiation. You create differentiation, you will be able to handle transfer pricing. Few things like 48(2)(b). ATIA, Another extremely dicey situations. People are not giving enough importance first to identify undertakings, and then having identified, ensuring that it is properly addressed from domestic transfer pricing perspectives, and keeping AS18 issues also in mind when you have an revenue cost moving to the other entities. It's extremely important for CFO to be part of the structure by which undertakings are defined and give it a business color rather than purely a tax color. As you know, there are many methods, but once you identify what is your business, you will decide whether you will use a cup, you will use a profit split method, you will use cost plus method, or you will do a combination of many of these methods. These options are available, and you should not leave it to the commercial department or any other department first to create contract and you end up explaining the contracts. Very, very important thing is joint development agreements, project management fees, allocation of expenses. These are not a tax points. These are business issues. You must convert. These are the methods corporates use for planning profitabilities between their different companies, ensuring that some of the entities do not get into sick undertakings. They ensure that there is enough liquidity available for specified purposes for which the entities get formed. You understand all that. Very important is do not treat this as tax activities. These are the core CFO activities. So one area which is given very, very least importance in CFO's role, unfortunately. The best of the brains work on direct taxes. We all would like to be part of a meeting solely, like understanding latest opinions, meeting Bansi Bhai. We all love that because that gives us a kick. Excise, oh, some BCom person is doing for 20 years, let him continue. Service tax, some smart young chap is there, give him service tax. Customs duty, CHA is handling, he will pay some bribe and ensure my assessments happens. VAT, I have so many branches, who has time to do? I will appoint some small chartered accountants for each branches, he will pay 10,000 rupees, get my VAT assessments done. Extremely important area from a CFO's perspective. If you understand the amount involved in indirect taxes, direct tax you can just ignore also. Indirect taxes is the backbone of your business structure. Are you paying on your goods transport services correctly? Are you a service provider? Are you apportioning your head office expenditure service tax correctly? Excise, are you exporting? Do you use Chapter 10? Do you go for export rebate refunds? Do you have a mechanism of identifying what should be my correct assessable value? How many of you have checked that whether you pay custom duty on demurrage? Is it gross? Is it net? On what basis the final provisional assessments and final assessment gaps is there? How much of your, which of your projects are in the area where there are VAT incentives? Have you applied? Have you utilized those VAT incentives? What are the latest investments which you are doing? Have you made a representation to the state bodies saying that I am making this 2,000 crores investment, I should be entitled for VAT? Was there a negotiation through either ASSOCHAM or CII or IMC through them? Are you ensuring that your C-form liabilities is killing you and your assessments are simply done, whereas you can handle it differently? If you see there is enough amount which is you can keep saving year over year, but you will have to spend time in understanding the structure, and any change in type of simply create an SOP, any change in this SOP requires CFO's approval. You would be surprised how many such cases people are simply scared to ask corporate office. They just don't understand this, and a large amount of leakage of revenue happens in this. In addition to that, you would be surprised your contingent liability consists majority from indirect taxes. Because somebody just takes something on store spare, somebody takes on diesel, somebody for small amount doesn't close show cause notices, and we just don't care. So are you filing periodical returns? Is it, again, why excise VAT is not part of ERP? I am amazed. Some of the best of the organizations, this is not part of ERP. If you just convert this into an ERP, sitting at a corporate office, you can control this entire thing. Maybe you have 40 branches and 20 locations, doesn't matter. One of the most dangerous provisions to ignore, SEBI. Do you have insider trading mechanism? Do you have a closing of window? Do you ensure that you have identified key people? Are you ensuring that the proper disclosure is there that they do not do? Is it possible that one of your juniors can fax the profit and loss just one day before to the stock exchange? Any one of you imagine what will be, whether your job will remain next day? Have you ensured that the confidentiality of it? Have you ensured that your 5% creeping acquisition limits are not breached? Have you ensured that your promoters' returns files are proper by the secretarial department? There are n number of things. And again, somehow CFOs feel that this is some secretarial compliance, wherein he communicates to the board that he has ensured all of this is okay. And here there are no compoundings, please understand. Your listing agreement is something like a Bible. You just cannot play with it. And never ever give an advice that no, this is, I heard somewhere it is possible. The correct way is to take what is the right way, that this is not acceptable. Once you say that, then you will not be into some compromising position at some stage of time. No, this is allowed. So you have to consistently take that SEBI insider trading is just not acceptable. Today, don't be surprised that some of your phones get tapped. This is normal thing. When a large M&A transactions happens, people think they can ask their wife to buy shares. It's ridiculous. A good profits, never. First rule is never dabble in the shares in the company in which you are working. I never buy my company shares. It's a principle. That will ensure that even by mistake, somebody cannot say, because one day board meeting, somebody says, "Kaise performance hai?" You say, performance is good. What do you mean by good? You have heard the classic case of in US. What happened? When, in fact, many of the CFOs, including me, we do not take a call on an earnings day. We just refuse to take calls till the board meeting gets over. Few more things is foreign exchange management. Are you filing your ODIs correctly? Are you ensuring that the declaration that this is not for a specified purpose is followed correctly? Simple thing. We all worried about statutory audit. How many of you carry out a FEMA audit in your organization? And confirm that all your activities are as per the exchange control manual. You will be surprised how many slippages keep happening on this. New things which are going to come, GST. It could be simpler, it could be complex. And GST is completely business oriented. So people who have never bothered how their VATs work or how their excise work will suddenly realize, if they don't get right now into the structuring of their businesses, their consignment agent, their stockyard transactions, there will be serious issues. Very important. You are only as good as you report to the outside world. It could be your promoters, it could be your management, it could be the equity analysts, it could be the rating agencies, it would be a minority shareholders who ask you some stupid questions and you say, no, we will not give all these informations. it's very important to be sensitive that as a CFO, people expect you to remain consistent in your behavior. They will write down today what you say on a conference call and compare the notes. Lenders will listen to you thinking that, and you will think you have done a wonderful job getting this proposal. But if you are not consistent, your credibility is not continuous. In a long term, no global lender will touch you. No analyst on a long term will support you. So very, very important that you are very transparent in your communications. You should be very consistent in your communications, and you should provide the only relevant information to the outside world. Guidance on profitability. One has to be extraordinarily careful. In India, things are still simpler. Globally, things are horrible. Investor interface. Are you only discussing with an only set of people, allowing them to come out with a buy report on your script? You need to be careful. Thank you. I hope I have tried to do justice to the last session. Anybody has any different views, we'll be happy to answer. Yeah, we bought recently SAP, and we use Accenture as an implementation partner. We also use Capgemini, but I think you have IBM's, which is equally good. So these are the partners, global partners. Advantage is they have an access to the global research, and they are able to provide you the best practices. Ramco, we were. Many years back, we were there on Ramco, but then that time company was about 1,000 to 2,000 crores. But then since company grew, we decided to migrate to Oracle. From Oracle, now we moved to SAP. Ramco was a good software at that point of time. I do not know currently how it is. I think it is on cloud currently.
What type of information can be given or cannot be given?
No, what we do, we normally have every quarter earnings call, and we also have an analyst meet. We ensure that our presentation goes on a website. We make a press release. We also do every month our production and sales press release. And we have a Q&A after the conference calls. Important is you should be seen as distributor of information across at least a class of analyst, and not to a specific analyst, because otherwise somebody can accuse you of leaking the selective information.
And any projected figure like?
Yeah, we provide. For example, we say that okay, whether we give. Unlike many companies, we don't give profitability guidance, we give a volume guidance. But people ask questions in the earnings call, are you going to maintain the profitability? We say yes, margins we are able to maintain. So whilst we do not give specific numbers, but in a broader way we identify whether costs are going up or revenues are falling, or what would be your debt, what would be your capex, okay. What will be your debt equity, debt EBITDA ratios. What do you expect is the weighted average interest rates? We do share all this information. And what happens, most of the analysts have their models. If you do not give, they'll just put whatever they understand and then come out with whatever report. So sometimes it's good to also educate the analyst so that they can prepare their research reports in time.
No, but that analyst prepare this information about set up his investors. Many analysts may be having their own investors, and it comes in questions, and we give information. The same information you are given on the site, or
we try to put. So our analyst presentation is extremely exhaustive. Press release is also extremely exhaustive, and we take care to ensure that it is disseminated to the majority of the analysts. That care we take. Yeah. There is a huge challenge. Like now, let me be honest that when you go live on an ERP, it's a nightmare because you do not know which quarter from which corner of the company because you cannot typically in ERP finance department doesn't do anything. Each function enters into an ERP. So unless they are as diligent as a finance department persons, you might have a serious challenge. A simple thing like somebody will put a consumption entry and your whole consumption can go haywire. So you cannot say, my consumption, have you gone and seen how a consumption reporting happens? Have you seen the cutoffs of sales or reporting? So then you start getting into a complete business structure and then, because otherwise finance department is very competent to prepare their own accounts and come out. But here, different people have to enter and then you have to own up whatever data they are putting.
But it is generally assumption wherever ERP, that is a duty of the finance or account department. No other people don't bother that much. As if we don't know, you do now. So in that scenario, how much you handling, and another thing, how much time required, because normally somebody say in 6 months will be over, or say somebody said 12 months will be over, and then overall cost will goes away, time also go higher than that. Another thing about the trial of the ERP and actually simultaneous running of the ERP, how many months, 3 months, 6 months, simultaneous?
We in JSW, we took 6 months. We took 6 months to go live all our 4 locations. And it's that time around 35,000 crores company. So 6 months, in my opinion, is a reasonable time. To your question, whether finance and account should drive a ERP, my answer is no. Because if finance accounts only decides to drive, it will fail. You will have to create a steering committee of different functions and make them accountable as a part of an ERP focus. Otherwise, you would never, because when data has to come from different functions, you will never have an ownership. Also, unless you look at a bit of an BPR when you are defining the processes, the ERPs fail. People just want to continue the same way which they were working, and then ERPs just do not work. But today we are seeing the benefits are so enormous that the trouble what we took 6 months was worth. Yes, please.
I think really appreciate a lot of input you gave in touch basing various other smaller aspects which generally gets overlooked, because as you said, typically today's contemporary CFOs would want to meet SOLIs and they want to enter into structuring rather than get into minor issues. But you did suggest that yes, we should look at those issues. But my question to you is that if I want to monitor as a CFO, if I want to really monitor, what are the checkpoints which I should have? So, say for example, whether all the TDS compliances have taken place, whether the FEMA compliances are in place, the service tax has been paid. So what are the checkpoints? How do I control? I mean, I understand the importance of controlling it, but do you have some kind of a practical experience where you would be seeing the monthly reports? What kind of formats, reports you have, which gives you a overview, bird's eye view of the entire thing, and you are sure that the things are in order?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way we try to do is, for example, statutory regulatory compliances, we have a detailed checklist. The detailed checklist provides not only yes, no, but also it says what are the transactions. For example, if you have to deduct 195, which transactions you are not deducted 195, you must ask the question. Then only you will be satisfied. So for example, so there is a detailed checklist. Then there are detailed checklists on indirect taxes. We get a complete update on a monthly basis on all our contingent liabilities, that legal cases, updates, etc., from legal and various consultants which work with us. On the foreign exchange, again, complete on a monthly basis, there is an update in terms of various foreign transactions and then have you met that? So what you are saying is very right. Unless you have a detailed checklist and SOP, everything you have to insist that this is done in this manner. Any change requires the approval. So that's the only way, because if you are working with a very large organization, it's impossible that every transactions will go through you. And you will have to insist on an SOP, delegation of power, and a checklist for compliances.
Okay, look, you said about SAP. My first question was that SAP in India, how much is now Indianized to that extent, even for a large organization? Do you think it's because every country has its own complexity in terms of the regulations and things like that? So
India version is there, so that way it is taking care.
No, but
so
across the spectrum, I mean,
we found it pretty